Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Emerald the Quilter. Today I'm going to share with you all of the blocks that I finished from the Animal Crackers quilt. These blocks are from the Perfect 5 Quilts book by It's So Emma. If you don't have your book and you'd like to sew along, the link is going to be down below. And we're going to take a look at all of these blocks that I've made. Here are all my blocks. I think that altogether they took about 3 hours to make. It took me a good 2 to 3 nights to sew them all together. And they were pretty easy to sew. Only a little bit of pinning was required for these intersections. And by interlocking my seams, it wasn't bad at all. And the sashing on these blocks, they're so short that I didn't even need to pin those. I really enjoyed sewing these blocks because they went by pretty quick and there were not as many seams as the last quilt that I made. I think that some of these fabrics really stand out more in this block than others, like these darker ones, because the fabric cuts, they're so thin that the lighter ones kind of get lost with the background. But we'll see how it looks once it's all laid out on the design wall, and I'm going to lay them out for you today. See, like these were pretty light. At a distance, they're kind of hard to see, but they're very noticeable when they're up close. So I think as long as I can spread out the lighter fabrics and the darker fabrics and have a nice balance, they're gonna look good. And colors together, they're just very fresh and they're happy colors. These larger florals, I was kind of worried that they weren't really gonna work in this block, but because the florals weren't too big, I think they did just fine. So this one here, this one, and then the dark pink one, which is somewhere here. Here it is. They actually look really nice. So don't be afraid if you haven't started this quilt yet to use fabrics that have large florals, because they do look good. I would be more careful with the lighter fabrics that have smaller motifs, but if you gotta go that route, make sure that your motifs are scattered all across the fabric. So these are all my blocks. There were 35 blocks to make this quilt, and I'm going to go ahead and put them up on my design wall and show you what I've decided. So I've decided on a layout, and I'm very happy with the placement of my fabrics that have the same patterns, the color intensity, and just the distribution of different shades and motifs all around. I did my best to try to keep a balance, and one thing I noticed while I was laying them out was I felt like I needed more green, especially towards like this bottom left area and the center here, but I had to stop moving my blocks around because I remembered that the binding I purchased is this color green. So once I've got the borders around the quilt and I've attached the binding, it's going to bring everything together, and that green I was looking for is going to be there. So I'm glad I brought that binding. this is the layout. The quilt has 5 columns and 7 rows. Now I'm ready to take the top 2. I'm going to sew them together. That way we can see what it starts to look like. So I'm at the sewing machine and I have my stitch length set to 1.5, and I took a picture of the layout I had so that I won't make any mistakes. And I have my top 2 rows next to me, so I'm going to just get 2 blocks at a time. I have a leader, and I'm going to start. What's nice about this quilt is that since there are only 5 blocks in each row, you're going to feel like you're making progress quickly, because you can get those rows sewn together faster. And I'm just checking. Kind of did a little swirl here. I'll have to go back and fix that one. I kind of curved, wasn't paying attention. The blocks are small enough that you don't really need any pins, and since one block has seams and the other block is only sashing, you don't have to interlock anything. So that just makes it another reason why this is an easy quilt to sew. I just try to remember to check my corners at the end so that I don't end up with one block shorter than the other. That's much more difficult to fix, I think, sometimes than just sewing a little uneven. As I go, I just make sure that the edges are aligned and that they feed through the foot evenly. I'm just checking those corners again. Okay. So I'm going back to the very first one I sewed, and you can see right there, I kind of curved a little bit, so I'm gonna get my seam ripper, disconnect these, and I'm just gonna fix just a few inches here. I find it easy to, when I'm ripping very short stitches, to go in through the top, snip one thread, and then make a little hole. So I have a little hole here to work with, and when I go to the back of the block, I can see where the thread has lifted, and it just makes it easy to remove my stitches. And I use like a gliding motion to get through them. Since the stitches are so close together, they kind of just come apart easier that way. Now I think that pretty much takes care of the curve. Oh, and you see this seam flipped, so I might as well fix that. There we go. And I can stitch over this evenly, straight. Okay, and put this down, and I'm going to go over like an inch than where I was, and then do the same on the other side. Okay, all fixed. So now I just need to open these up, cut these blocks apart, and lay them back in the order that they were. So I know that the large floral, which is this one, needs to go at the top, and then the peach floral with the gray stripe goes right next to it, and I'm laying them out on the table beside me. Then this little checkered floral print, and right below I have peach, light peach with a more solid dark gray, dark green, and the green check at the end. Okay, so I have those laid out. I need another leader. They're not necessary, but I like to have them, because then it just makes those first stitches that can sometimes be wonky off of my quilt. And I'm going to make sure this time that when I get to this seam that it doesn't flip on me, because this bump on the sewing machine can push your seams in the opposite direction. So just a little lift will take care of that. Making sure these are even. And now I'm on the second row. Checking my corners and edges again. Ready to cut. And now it's time to add the very most right block in these two top rows. So I have my peach at the top of row 1, getting another leader. Making sure my corners are together, and then tucking it under the foot. And here is the last one, and I'm just making sure that I had it this way laid down where they were both vertical, but this one I just had to make sure that it's going the right direction, which is horizontal. Okay. So my 2 top rows are sewn. I'm going to iron these flat, pin them, and then sew the top 2 rows together so we can see what this quilt is going to look like. Alright, I'm at my ironing board and I have the top row and the second row laid together. When I was laying them out, I thought, oh no, my sashing pieces and the seams are going to get in the way because they were both facing towards the sashing. But then when I had them properly aligned, I saw that they in fact were not. So let me show you. Right here, and see if I can have you just a little closer. These 2 unironed seams, I can interlock. This one here and then this one is what threw me off at first. So when you are ironing and you're about to pin, just check to see which seams you need to iron and make sure that the rows are actually aligned and you won't make that mistake that I was about to make. So to begin, I am going to just press them all towards the sashing. Normally I press one side of the block and then flip it over to set the seam, but because this has the sashing is already in between, I don't think it's entirely necessary when I can just flip it back over on the right side and press on the top. So that one's done. Now I'm going to do the same with this one. Flip it right side up and press. I'm going to check my phone to make sure that I still have it facing the right direction. And I do. So I'm ready to align these rows. See, there I go. I was about to line up the sashing. The edge and the edge. And then turn them right sides together and pin. This quilt design is really great because once you've made sure that you are lining everything up correctly, the seams just all work together. There's no guesswork. Okay, this is now ready to be sewn. Now I'm so excited to sew these top 2 rows together and see how it turns out. I'm going to check the edges as I go. If they're not perfect, it's okay. They're gonna fit right into that seam. And I didn't trim a single block. Right now, I'm just paying attention to not go over those pins. I sometimes do by accident, but I make an effort not to do it. Any sort of wobbliness that you have in your fabrics, if they're about as much as I have, they will quilt out. They will. You won't notice them at all. Now I think mine actually came out pretty good. Especially because there's more seams going along the height of the block than the length of the block. And usually with every seam that you add in a block, if you don't have that perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance, you shorten your block going in that direction. So I was pretty accurate and I'm happy with that. Okay. I'm gonna iron this flat so that we can see it. Okay, I've got the top 2 rows sewn together, and here's that leader that I can cut off. Let's take a look at the back. And zoom in here so you can see. So the seams are looking pretty tidy. You can see where I popped the seams open and how I just made the seam that went across just go towards one direction. I think it's downwards. And I don't have really, that I can see here, any seam mishaps. So is this important? Well, if you're sending it to a long armor for this quilt, I don't think that your seam tidiness is as important because long arms are very strong. But if you are using a domestic machine like I am, then it is important because they can only punch through so much fabric before you have any kind of issue. So I'm very happy with it. Let's take a look at it against the other blocks. Here are the top 2 rows. I'm going to add them to the layout. See how it looks. It's so pretty. I love it. Now, you may have noticed that in the pattern, the way that It's So Emma designed the layout of the blocks is by color. So one color going diagonally, but I did not have enough colors to do that, and I was okay with that. I really like the way that the colors are dispersed in this quilt top, and I can't wait to finish sewing all my rows together. So if you do not have the Perfect 5 quilt book by It's So Emma, you're going to want to get this book. If you have not finished sewing your quilt blocks, do those, because the next time I see you, we're going to quilt this quilt top. So thank you so much for sewing along with me today. I hope you're enjoying my videos. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!